Okay, well, I think we are ready to get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for braving the rain to be here with us. Somebody was just saying apparently it's warmer in Berlin today than it is here in Perugia, in Amsterdam as well. So, so here we are. Right. And we're really delighted to be in such a beautiful venue to share these projects with you today. I'm Regina Lawrence. I direct the Agora Journalism Center at the University of Oregon. And one of the projects that we're working on now is called Finding Common Ground, and that's with much thanks to the Robert Bosch Foundation and also the News Integrity Initiative. We launched a project earlier this year designed to find and support projects by media outlets that are attempting to bring people together in one format or another to bridge their divides, to engage in conversation, dialogue, and debate. And we've had the good fortune to be able to feature these projects in 3 different panels here at IGF. So the projects that we're going to hear from today are really, I think, remarkable and a wonderful example of the ways that around the world media outlets are playing a crucial role and an innovative role in, again, bringing people together to sort of look up from their devices, engage with one another, and try to tackle these problems of polarization that feel very profound at this particular moment. So because you have your programs and we want to get right into it, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on introductions. So we're going to start at the end here with Idmedien, who's going to talk to us about her project called My New Homeland, Your New Homeland. Welcome, Ina.
Thank you. Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. I would like to talk to you about the project My New Homeland, Your New Homeland, Citizen Talks for Finding Homeland Discovery After Flight. The idea of the project is that different worlds meet. Refugees from Middle East or Africa who recently fled to Germany meet displaced persons from the Second World War. Let me give you an example and introduce you 2 persons who represent those two groups. There is Firas. He is 37 years old, and he fled the war in Syria in 2015. He told in the Citizen Talks,
"Hundreds of thousands of people were killed by the war in Syria. That's a tragedy. I lost my home. My family is torn apart. I lost my job as an engineer."
On the other hand, there is Miss Inge Neumann. She also took part in the project, and she is now 84 years old, and she was displaced from Swinoujscie during the Second World War, and she was 10 years old. She told in the Citizen Talks,
"When I was a child, I witnessed something terrible."
Oh, sorry.
I witnessed something terrible. A bombing on my city killed thousands of people. I will never forget the corpses lying in the street. Everything was destroyed. It was terrible.
Concerning his flight, Firas told us,
"We were afraid of our lives. We fled in a group. Children were crying. We felt hungry. We heard shootings. In a little boat, we crossed the Mediterranean Sea with plastic bowls. We removed water from the boat so we did not drown."
And Miss Neumann remembered concerning her displacement.
"I was shocked and frightened. We were afraid of our lives. As a child, I did not understand what happened. I remember it was cold and we felt hungry. My mother kept the children and we fled with 1 little baggage to Lauenburg."
That's in northern Germany. Now they both, Miss Neumann and Firas, live in the same country town in Germany, that's Ratingen, and they haven't met before. In the Citizen Talks, it's the first time they meet. And the meeting took place in a citizen meeting venue in February 2018 in Ratingen, that's near Düsseldorf, near Cologne. And we planned a period of citizen talks in a period from In 2 years, we plan 20 citizen talks, and approximate 500 senior citizens are estimated. I would like to focus the differences between the two groups, between Ms. Neumann, who represent the one group, and between Firas, who represent the other group, who recently fled to Germany. The political background of the refugees of the Second World War and the African and Asian region who recently fled to Germany is very, very different. The language is different, the culture is different, the religion is different. And in view of stereotypes, the senior citizens are often afraid of single traveling men without family bonds. They're afraid of a higher level of aggression in society, and they often don't accept headscarves, and they don't accept when gender conception in Western Europe are not accepted from other groups. And the perspective of the refugees is another one. The refugees in Germany are very uncertain of their residence status. They do not know if they are allowed to stay in Germany. They do not know what will happen with their work, and they do not know can we get in contact with other people and what will be with our social status. And they often told in the talks, we feel isolated and we are not in contact with other people, with Germans. And they also uttered aloofness towards lifestyle and values in West Europe, in Europe. Now the dialogue in the citizen talks starts, and the starting point for the dialogue is they both share the experience of war and flight, and they both know what it means when life is in danger, and they lost their homeland, they lost family members and friends, and they know the difficulty of homeland finding far away from home. And the topics they talk about in the citizen talks are, for example, how is it possible to begin a new life in the foreign? What are the difficulties? And how can integration be successful? And could it be possible that they together create new projects for a better integration? And in the previous citizen talks, there were the following points agreed. Further meetings were agreed, and there were offers from the senior citizen to help them with the language and to help them to make contacts, to help for the jobs. And some joint activities were agreed, like cooking or further talks concerning different gender conceptions. Now, a spin-off project is planned in Dortmund, and it should be realized in this year. And the reason I plan to realize it in Dortmund is Dortmund is a city that is disparated between north and south. In the northern town of Dortmund live 60,000 people and over 40 migrants. The unemployment rate is very high. It's about 25%. And there are many challenges in the town. Drug abuse, for example, and the poverty level is very high. Many people depend on social welfare. And the people in the northern town of Dortmund have not often contact with people who live in the southern town of Dortmund. And now 4 citizen talks are planned and funded by your organization. Thank you for that. And to show you the effect of the citizen talks, I would like to focus what Ms. Neumann said at the end of the talk.
She said, "I'm glad I met Firas. So I get refugees to whom I usually have no contact, a face. Our world is very different, but after the talk, I want to know more about his world. Through my own experience, I know the difficulty of starting somewhere else."
Mm-hmm. And Ms. Newman said, I felt seen with my difficulties, and it's for me easier to talk with persons who have a similar experience with war and flight. And I want to focus one point which I think is very important, that dialogue could be successful. And Firas pointed out, I just start the, oh, does it work? It's just a small statement. Does it that? No. Okay. Does the video start?
Can we get any technical help with playing a video? Thank you.
Start it here?
Wir müssen ein bisschen zuerst lächeln, aber mit richtig Gefühl auch. Und wir müssen Hallo sagen und eine Frage machen, vorstellen, selbst vorstellen. Und dann die andere, ich denke, die Leute hier sind sehr nett. Sie brauchen nur die anderen offen sein. Und ja.
That sounds very simple, but I think it's a very important point for the beginning of the dialogue. And the expected outcomes of the projects are the changing of the attitude towards each other. I hope they could reduce stereotypes and social distances. And to put it in other words, there's a new growing common ground. Thank you for your attention, and thank you, Anne. Okay.
Thank you, Ina. And I should have mentioned that Ina has been a freelance journalist and working in journalism for a very long time. So one of the reasons I found the project inspiring was, you know, at this point in your career to take on something so meaningful and ambitious. Next, we're going to hear from Anne Hillman, who's with Alaska Public Media, and she's going to tell us about her very interesting project, bridging people around, well, I'll let you explain.
Around incarceration, and I have a PowerPoint, in theory. Sorry. I feel like I should sing a song or something to entertain you
Exactly.
in the meantime, but I'll spare you. I'll talk just a little, I'll just start and we'll figure it out. So I run a project called Community and Unity, which is, it's a community dialogue series. And what it started as originally were these panel conversations, Community and Unity. What it started as originally were panel conversations meant for television, meaning, and we had people sitting up on a stage. This is actually one of the later ones that was only for radio, but talking about different topics were impacting Alaska. So we did everything from foster care to re-entering the community after prison. This one was on being transgender. And it was a panel, but it was a lot of questions and conversation from the community. And the idea was to create a space to let people talk more in depth about some of the things that they were hearing about in the news. And especially in the case of the foster care one, it was a chance for people to talk to the woman who runs the foster care program in Alaska, which has astronomically high numbers of children in care. We won't get into that. So we started as a panel conversation, which kind of creates this idea that you have people who are experts, and especially in the case of being transgender, it was people who had very personal experiences with this. But it came to be pretty obvious that that wasn't a format that's gonna work for everything. So I switched it to circle conversations. This is us setting up for one on race and identity. So the idea behind community and unity is simple as you can possibly get. You get people into a room, you sit in a circle, and you talk. We record it for radio, so we broadcast it later, both on the station in Anchorage, Alaska, and then around the state. We have a lot of rural communities with public radio stations as well. And it's a chance to put everybody on the same plane and put everybody in the same context. Nobody's an expert. This is something that impacts all of us. So we start each conversation with a set of agreements, which are basically respect each other, but sort of laid out a little bit more to say that everyone needs to stay engaged. So instead of just listening to say, well, my reaction to that is, it's listening so you actually hear what someone else is saying instead of just thinking about your response. Speak your own truth, because especially when you're talking about race and identity or power and privilege or mental illness, it's so many times you're talking and saying what you think people expect you to say as opposed to what you're actually experiencing. And what you're experiencing might be really uncomfortable. And you just kind of have to sit with that. One person very wisely told me once, like, if you're trying to comfort someone who's uncomfortable, you're basically saying, oh, don't feel that, don't feel that. So accept that you might be uncomfortable, as might the others around you. And then you're not gonna solve all the problems in this one little conversation. So accept non-closure. So we moved from having conversations inside of the studio to moving out into the community. We were in a homeless shelter, an overflow homeless shelter for this particular conversation about homelessness. And a lot of the conversation, I'm running around with a microphone and sitting on the floor so I don't block people's views of each other while we can still record. So last fall, I do a lot of reporting on incarceration. The recidivism rate in Alaska is 66%. And it's just kind of this revolving door. So A, it's a problem for families, it's a problem for individuals, and it's also, if you're part of our state legislature, it's a financial problem. And so there's been a lot of pushes to make that, to reduce recidivism. But the problem with that is that people get out of jail and they've been cut off from their communities and they've got a criminal record and there's a stigma. And so it's hard to get a job, it's hard to get a place to live, and it's hard to become part of the community again. Especially in Alaska right now, there's a lot of misconceptions about what it means to have a criminal past. So in the process of reporting on what's happening within the prisons, solutions that are being developed to help people prepare for release, I asked if we could have a conversation inside the prison with inmates and with community members and with staff. And one of the superintendents was all for it. So that's exactly what we did. We opened up the doors of the prison, and folks in this smallish town of Seward, so I think Seward's like 6,000, 7,000 people somehow. There's been a prison on the edge of this community that has been there for 30 years, and people have never been inside of it. So we had 25 or so community members, including a couple individuals who had previously been incarcerated there and came back to share their experiences, and 11 inmates. And instead of me giving you a rundown of what happened, let's listen. This is like a wee little snippet of the conversation, in theory.
When you come in, you hear these grandiose stories of these guys that have done these crimes from way back when, and sometimes we try to model ourselves after what they've done. But then when you come in and you see them and you see that they're changed and they're a different person, it gives you a different idea of what kind of model they are. You know, the young guys come in and they think that, oh, these are the bad, excuse my language, but these are the guys that are the guys, you know? And when you meet these guys, they're not what the newspaper says. They're much more than that. And they say that you have to respect yourself and you have to respect who the people that you're around. You have to respect your community. That changes the youngsters' mentality, because now the guys that are the leaders of the community are not as negative as they thought they would be, you know? So now I have no I have no choice but to be a positive person. You know, if I go be negative over here, I'm gonna be shunned, and nobody's really gonna mess with me, because that negativity is not conducive to the positive stuff that we have going on with the compound. You know, so.
Would you say that's true of everyone in Spring Creek, this entire prison? Everyone's like, "Yay, let's be positive and better people."
It's not necessarily let's be positive. It's okay. We have these opportunities to live a little more comfortably. Let us live comfortably.
What does that mean in this context?
In this context, it's not having to worry about too much. You know, the preconceived notion for prisons is very negative. It's a war zone. You know, we don't want it to be necessarily a physical war zone, because our population is small, and we live in a community that's super small, and we have really strong family ties. A lot of people are, because the cities are so small. You know, I could be your cousin, and he could be your cousin by marriage and stuff. So now I have to look out for you, and then we pack up like that, and we have to watch each other's back. Well, the best way to watch each other's back is to be comfortable, to be safe, you know, so that we don't have to be violent and have to be, you know, super aggressive all the time. So that's comfortable. Comfortable is just like in a community. You guys want to be safe. You want to be a community. You want to know that you can go to this side of town or that side of town and not have any worries. You know, that's how we want to be. We want to be the same way. You know, we learn. We realize. A lot of us have realized that this is the kind of pain that we inflicted on the community out here. Okay, let's get out of that. Let's get out of that. You're always going to have people that are angry. You're always going to have people that are vengeful and stuff like that. But if we bond together to be men about it, you know, those kind of people, not necessarily be shunned, but they'll have no choice but to change. Even if the change takes a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, they'll have to change. And if we can get one person to change that has come to Spring Creek with all the stories of this is how Spring Creek was, blah, 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 if we get one person to change and go out to the streets and say, no, man, there's a better way of living, then that might change a 16, 17, 18-year-old. You know, that might change the guys that's in McLaughlin that's already on the path to be stronger criminals, I guess you could say.
So what he was saying about Alaska being very small, it's geographically massive, but it is pretty small population-wise. And so actually Daniel, who produced that audiogram, went to high school with Nick and was shocked to hear how much he had changed from when they were playing basketball together 15 years ago. So when we say Alaska's small, it's very true. Like, you're very connected. It's hard not to know someone who has been impacted by our system of prisons. And so getting people into the prisons to reduce the stereotypes and to break down those barriers it's huge. So one of the reactions from this particular event, and by the way, Spring Creek is actually the maximum security prison in the state. So the worst of the worst, if you will, go there. And this is from the assistant superintendent of the prison. She said, I spoke to most of the community members as they left, and everyone talked to express that they had enjoyed their experience here at Spring Creek. A few even stated that they were leaving with changed points of view. And during the conversation, a woman who had lived in the community for, I don't know, 20, 30 years, had never been in the prison, but she worked at the library in the interlibrary loan program, which sent books into the prison for people to use. And another guy who was there, John Woodard, used to be inside Spring Creek, isn't anymore. And he's like, yeah, I know your name because I saw it all the time. Your books helped me get my college degree. So it was building connections and helping people understand the success that can happen outside of prison. And that's that. So now through the continuation of this project, after the program in Spring Creek was successful enough that the Department of Corrections was like, hey, do you want to do this in all of the prisons? And I said, sure. So we'll be doing it, we're starting in 4 different prisons, focusing on different elements of life, everything from a pretrial facility where people, sometimes they're there just for a few days, sometimes they're stuck there for years, awaiting their trials and awaiting permanent placement, to in Alaska, there's a lot of communities that are not connected to the rest of the state by roads. You have to fly there or get there by boat. So we have prisons in rural areas which are predominantly filled with Alaska Natives. There's, of course, racism and disproportionality in Alaska. And so we'll be talking a lot about how do you stay connected to your culture and using culture as a tool for changing and resilience within prison in one of the rural prisons. So that's what we're up to.
Thank you, Anne. The person sitting to my right is not Eve Perlman of Spaceship Media, as you may have noticed. So we're really delighted to be able to welcome Sebastian Horn from Zeit Online, who graciously agreed to step in when Eve had some difficulties getting to IJF this year. So Sebastian is going to talk about Zeit Online's most recent projects around pairing people for political discussion.
Yes, thank you, Regina. Thank you all for coming and for listening to us today. I'm working for Zeit Online. I'm the Deputy Editor-in-Chief, and I want to tell you about one of our projects that we're really proud about that we started actually last year. It was called Germany Talks. And this year, it's going to be called My Country Talks, and I will get to that in a second. So what we did last year was we matched thousands of people for what is close to a political Tinder format. So on the same day, at the same time in Germany, pairs of people met who had completely opposing political views. And we helped them arrange these meetings. Briefly, I want to tell you how we went about that. So on our website, we had a very small widget in some of our articles where we would ask people 5 questions. And they would be very divisive questions that we knew our readership would be divided about. So one of the questions was, did Germany take in too many refugees? Another question was, is the West treating Russia fairly? Another one was, should we allow gay marriage, which has since happened in Germany? And there were 2 more, and people answered those 5 questions, and then they would give us some contact details and some personal information. And when we first launched this, we weren't actually sure whether that would work. It was a complete experiment. This hadn't been done before, and we were afraid that just nobody would sign up. But at the same time, we thought that if too many people would sign up, we would have a problem, because then we would have to manage all of this. So in the end, 12,000 people actually answered the questions and gave us their details, and they said, yes, I want to meet someone who I've never met before, who has completely different political views, and just to talk to them for 1 or 2 hours. So we had these participants willing to do this, and we developed a clever, what we think clever algorithm that helped us do the matching. And the way the matching worked was it took into consideration the distance in opinion, so how much did they disagree, and also how close they lived to each other. So we asked them for the zip code, and if they lived within a radius of 20 kilometers, we would send them an email saying, hey, we found a match for you, do you want to meet this person? And if they said yes, we would send out contact details to these 2 people, and they would arrange the meeting themselves. We told them, don't do this in a private place, please do it in a public place, because there are certain concerns about what's going to happen when thousands of people meet, and we can't be there for all of these meetings, obviously. But in the end, like I said, I think more than 1,000 people actually agreed to meet, and they all did on the same day. And the feedback we later got was just overwhelmingly positive. They were just so happy. We got really nice selfies from them. And they were saying that's actually, widened their horizon, and they were excited about that experience that they had. So that was a great success, we felt. That was good fun. And so for this year, we thought, why not, take this to a global level and build a platform that's called My Country Talks, because there are certainly, divides and in any society these days. So when you go to mycountrytalks.org, you can see what this is all about, and there's also a nice description and 9-step guide for how these events will work. Basically, what we're doing is we're building the software that we use is going to be open source, and anybody can use it. Anybody can host their own My Country Talks event. And we have already a few partners who said they would. So in Austria, there's Der Standard, in Denmark, Politiken, or in Italy, La Repubblica. And they all said they want to do an event like this in their societies. So they can use our tool with the matching algorithm, with all the communication that is required to ask those questions to their readers, and to then have them arrange meetings. And what's going to be different compared to what we did is that you can partner with a different media organization. Because we were facing the problem that Die Zeit or Zeit Online in Germany has there's a certain bias in our readership. It's a filter bubble. We know that we're a bit left-leaning, liberal, type of people, and that's what our readers are as well. So it was kind of tough actually to find enough people that were conservative so we can find a match for everyone. So we encourage all our partners to look for a media organization that is a bit on the other end of the political spectrum, which for me I think adds a very nice aspect because it kind of encourages cooperation between media organizations that sometimes wouldn't talk to each other, right? So imagine the New York Times did this with Fox News. That would be amazing, right? I don't know if they talk to each other, but them in one project would be like the gesture of this, actually I think in itself is really powerful, right? So, yeah, so we have this network of partners. We're still looking for partners. So if there's anyone here in the audience who thinks, hey, this is great, my country needs this, well, maybe we have elections coming up, or any other reason to do this, please get in touch. The more the merrier, really. I mean, we're going to be doing this in Germany with a network of partners this year. So ARD, or Public Service Broadcaster, is going to be involved as well, or German Press Agency. But also local partners, which I think is really interesting. So Thüringer Allgemeine is a local paper in a region that is known for very high, lots of voters for the populist party. So that's going to be an interesting factor as well. And maybe to connect all of this back to what we do, we're a news website, right? So all of this is a great opportunity for reporting. So what we did last year was that for 6 of these matchups, we would send reporters and ask the participants if it's okay that they listen to part of their conversation and write a story. So a Muslim would meet someone who has a right-wing populist opinion. We covered that. And there was somebody who's against gay marriage who met someone who's lesbian. So that was also really interesting. And these are just really, really great stories that came out of this. So there's something for you in there as a media organization, in addition to just facilitating, I think, something that is really important for democracy. Right. So again, please do get in touch if you want to be a partner. This is very much a joint effort. We're not, this is not a Zeit Online thing anymore. This is supposed to be a global network. So I hope a lot more of you are going to come on board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have lots of time for some discussion and questions from the audience. I'd like to kick it off with 1 or 2 questions from the stage to begin with. I'm really struck listening to you talk, and so gratified again that we're able to work on the Finding Common Ground project, and thanks again to the Robert Bosch Foundation in particular, because I think it was your vision that the project should be international like this. And for the Agora Journalism Center, this is our first foray into international work, and it's been very exciting. And our mission is all about supporting and learning from media innovation in service to civic engagement. And each of these projects certainly fits that frame, and yet you're each doing it in a very different context. One of the things that I noticed as I was listening to you this time is the type of innovation that I think your projects represent. Many times when we think about innovation, we think about tech and technology, and certainly technology plays an important role, particularly I think in the Zeit project, but it's really not foregrounded. It's not the point, right? The point is instead treating individual members of the community as the experts of their own stories, and really foregrounding them telling their stories and then entering into dialogue with others, and doing this all not in a way that is, we need to get the story, right? This for me is what's an exciting innovation. It's not about sort of getting the story, it's about letting these conversations and these stories develop, and from that, really rich stories emerge. So I hope that that's a fair characterization. It does make me wonder, though, what do you think is the most innovative thing about what you're trying to do? And maybe I might start with you, if I could, Sebastian.
I'm not sure about the most innovative, but I think what's great about the project is that it obviously has this very strong offline element. We're an online news website, and many times when you think about engaging with your readers, you think about online, you think about social media, you think about a comment section, and we do have all of that. But for that one day, we say, please go out and meet in person. I think that's a great element of this. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything innovative about what I'm doing. I mean, that's just it. Like, sitting in a circle and talking is something that goes back millennia. You know, that's what people have always done. And so the fact that it's considered innovative that I'm recording the conversation and putting it on radio seems sort of mind-boggling, because it's not. Like, you're talking, we're all sitting in a room, we're just talking.
Interesting. Nina, do you want to add?
Yes. In my experience, it's an innovation that, because of the personal encounters, attitudes changes. And I have experienced it. I have moderated several citizen talks, and there was a change. At the beginning of the dialogue, there was a distance between the people, and they didn't talk with each other, and the refugees sat on the one side, the senior citizens on the other side. And after the talk, and I use the term homeland, and they both has a feeling concerning the term. And so we could develop a dialogue. And after the talk, senior citizens and refugees get in conversations with each other, and they agreed further meetings. And I work as a freelance journalist over 20 years, and it was for me very surprising that it works. Okay.
Maybe I'll ask one more question. I noticed in listening to you talk, it really struck me this time especially, how intensely personal and political each of your projects is. I mean, the focus, the topic, the subject matter, intensely personal and also very political or politicized. And I wondered, what is the single biggest challenge that you are facing as you try to, carry out these projects? Do you want to begin?
I think the biggest challenge is you do not know what happened. The process is open, and if you work and if you talk with people, you cannot control that. You can provide a dialogue, and you can provide a talk and the aim, but when you talk with people who experience things like terrible things like war and flight, that's very emotional. And yes, I think that's a big risk, but I'm not afraid of it. That's reality. And I think it's very important for democracy to be in contact with different groups, because in my opinion society in Germany gets more and more separated, and I think we need more dialogue with different groups. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the biggest fear is that nobody will show up and nobody will want to talk about whatever the topic is, which has happened around the issues of mental illness. Within the prison conversations, people show up because people are interested. It's a very relevant topic. I think the biggest probably challenge, though, is getting people in the newsroom to understand why this is important, and to getting people to see that just listening to people is content enough, and that listening to people is really what we need to be doing more of.
I'm curious the way you phrase it, the just listening. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
I feel like traditional journalism, so much our role is like we're not just listening, we're listening, and then we're taking little pieces of these stories, and we're constructing in public media, we're constructing these 4 to 5 minute narratives, and it's us, like, everything ends up coming through the journalist's lens. Whereas in these conversations, I'm guiding it and I'm moderating it to keep it flowing, but I'm not chopping up people's words. I'm not trying, like, I'll walk in with like 3, 4, 5 pages full of questions and do this every single time and never get to any of them because you'd think I'd stop preparing so much. But because ultimately it's not about what's interesting to me. Like, ultimately, it's not about what I think is important. Ultimately, it's about what the people in this circle think is important, and so they're driving it. And it's my role to, like, link and watch people's body language so I know what's, like, really catching people, but it's not my role to say what we need to talk about And I feel like that's not, like, it's a sense of, you have to give up control, and I think it's important, and I don't know within the traditional journalism world how often people are willing to just do that. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I live in this cute little backwater enclave with nice mountains, but I don't know, I'd love input from the rest of you on that.
Can I just say that I love both of your projects. I said this before, but I want to say it here. It's so inspiring because I think they're so focused on one particular community and idea. So it's great to listen to both of you. Concerning our project and the challenges, I think we were afraid the challenge would be that nobody wants to do this, and we now know that this is not true. The biggest challenge now, as I said, is to actually get enough people to sign up from the full political spectrum. We tried this last year as well, not with media partners, but by reaching out to organizations that have a lot of members in Germany. And we asked them to send the link out to their members and somehow make it more diverse in that sense. But I think the challenge now is actually to get enough people so we can match everyone with someone who really has opposing political views. But we're confident we can figure it out this year.
We'd love to take some questions from the audience. So you had your hand up first, so please go ahead. And is it the norm, is it custom here that people introduce who they are in the audience when they ask a question? Yes. Do we have a microphone? Thank you. Right up here.
Hi, I'm Edith from Austria. I very much appreciate the initiative and all your projects, and I've got 2 questions, one that is to all of you. You mentioned that you get so many nice stories out of your projects, and I wanted to know what is actually the journalistic involvement? How do you, as a reporter, as a journalist, how do you cover it, and how do you get the stories out of it? And the second question is also to all of you, but especially to you, Sebastian. How do you document, or how do you shift all these learnings from your organizations to other institutions or other newsrooms? So how do you document this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. I collect the stories, and I would like to, on the long run, to make a multimedia project. That's a plan.
I record the whole conversation, and it is edited down slightly to a 1-hour-long radio production that's distributed around the state.
Right, so how do we document this was the question you asked me to write. So we published these articles last year. We also asked people to send their selfies and to give feedback through email, and a lot of people did. To be honest, it wasn't the most structured way to measure impact or get feedback, and that's going to be different this year as well. So as the very last step after the event, we're going to contact everyone again and ask them to fill out a feedback form, potentially asking them whether the conversation had changed their opinion. On this website, so this mycountrytalks.org, at the bottom it links to all our articles that we published, and some of them are in English, so you can read them as well. We documented both our reporting on the matches and also how we did it. So they're kind of like behind-the-scenes articles that show you how improvised this whole thing was. It was just like a project, a matter of a couple of weeks. It was done quite rapidly, yeah. You mean this here? Yeah, so we did 1 workshop, which was to gather input because we couldn't assume that what we did in Germany would work in other cultural contexts. So there was very interesting feedback, starting with the fact that we recognized, so we used zip codes in Germany, which works, but in a country or in a region like Alaska, we talked about this, when you use a zip code area, it could be, I don't know, thousands of square miles. So there are differences, right? Also, regarding the very, very interesting, the questions you would ask that divide your particular society. So we're hoping to have one question that works in every country. It's possibly about, you know, open-closed borders or open-closed society, because we feel that's something that, you know, many countries are debating. But then there are questions that are very particular. So Norway, for example, they said we have a huge debate about wolves. Like, should we kill more wolves? It's something that Norway debates, you know?
That's a reasonable debate, actually.
Yeah, actually, many countries said there's a debate about that in Germany as well. So maybe that could be the question. I don't know. So we did that, and now there's a Slack channel to keep the conversation going, and we're in the process of figuring out dates for all the countries when they're going to do their events.
Great. Another question? Yes, sir, right here.
Tim Dixon from organisation More in Common, that works on narratives to connect people across difference, and also these transformational encounters. So I've got a question about the challenge of how we create these initiatives at scale. We've done a ton of public opinion research. It shows shows exactly the open-closed division is what's dividing our societies, and also that there's a real sense of disunity and division that people are anxious about. And we did a big event last year in the UK, the Great Get Together, which got several million people participating as just a sort of a very light encounter around the anniversary of Joe Cox's death, the British Labour MP who was killed by a neo-Nazi, and we sort of framed it as bringing people together. We even had the right-wing newspaper, The Sun, Murdoch's paper, support it, which was an interesting kind of reflection of there's an appetite for it. However, we find that when we deliberately bring people together around overcoming difference, naturally the people who are attracted to that are people who have a characteristic of curiosity. Curiosity is essentially the characteristic of people who are open, not the characteristic of people who are closed. And I know when there was an experiment in the US, something I think was Flip My Feed, which was swap your Twitter feed with essentially a conservative or a liberal for a day or for a week. And I think 90% of the participants were Democrats, because it's just culturally, it's just people, they're interested in somebody else's view, that on the other side, there's less of that. The question is just what your thoughts are about that, because our reflection on this, we want to create more transformational encounters. We think the way to do it is probably not around connection across difference, because the people who really need to do that most aren't interested in doing that. But they are interested about their kids at school, or they're interested in community safety, or whatever the issue is, or jobs in their community. So we're just thinking about how we can, in a sense, create opportunities to connect people across these lines of difference on shared interests, rather than on just connection for the sake of overcoming difference. But anyway, just interested in your thoughts on that approach.
I agree with you that connecting over topics versus over just because we have polarizing different viewpoints is important. Where I'm working in Alaska it's primarily a Republican state, minus the city where I happen to be in, and even that's fairly conservative. I think when I don't know, if you frame things just around connecting over difference, you're right, you probably do just attract people who are just from one side. If you frame things around, here's this issue that impacts all of us, people do tend to show up, and your conversations are more productive, because it's what do we all have in common, and what are our varying viewpoints. So I don't know if, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Do you want to respond to those, Sebastian?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and you have a very good point there. There is this strong bias of self-selection, so people participate that are willing to go into dialogue, and there's you can you can argue that people that are in favor of an open society are the ones that also are in favor of dialogue, and those that are in favor of closed society might be the ones who are more about suppressing opposing views. You can argue that way, certainly. I think we were lucky in the way that there was a very strong element of curiosity. So our promise, actually it wasn't a promise because we couldn't promise it, but the idea that we're going to introduce you to someone who you don't know and he has different political views, it's actually like going on a blind date, right? So I think we that helped overcome that challenge. But I think your approach is as valuable to get people to talk around certain topic areas. Yeah, it's a very good point.
Another question?
The woman in white.
Okay.
And you are all involved in follow-up projects. Now I'm wondering, is there also a dark side? So was there any negative feedback? Or you mentioned, Sebastian, that you wanted the dates to meet in a public place, so maybe also because of security considerations. So maybe you want to share also the negative side of the projects, if there are some.
You want to?
Do you want to?
Did I understand you right? You mean what doesn't work in the project? In my opinion, it's very important that it is an open process, and the senior citizens, for example, some of them have prejudices and argue in stereotypes, and that's not solved in the talks, and I think that could not be the aim, to solve those problems, because we have 2 hours and we just can initiate a process of a dialogue. It's just a beginning. It's not less and it's not more. And but I think the beginning, that people talk with each other and get in conversation and get an idea, oh, this person's, now I have another opinion about this person than before. That's an important step, I think. Mm-hmm. Is it okay? Mm-hmm.
I mean, the negative side, when we were talking about foster care, touchy subject, children are being removed from homes. The person who ran the foster care system brought an armed guard with her. I mean, concealed, but there's security there for fear, for reactions. You have the chance that it turns out that people say that they care about something and then nobody shows up. So we were talking about what it's like to live with mental illness, and nobody showed up except for the people who were willing to share their experiences, which emphasizes the need to have a conversation, but it also is painful. Yeah.
I guess for us, one of the things that didn't work or that weren't great was that we had to disappoint a few people because we couldn't find a match. People had to agree to their match, and if they didn't, we didn't do a rematching because we ran out of time. So we had to tell some people, sorry, we couldn't find anyone, and it's kind of like being turned down at a club or something. Like, you know, and some said that obviously then sometimes somebody wouldn't show up, and they'd say, oh, sorry, my partner didn't show up, I didn't have a meeting. So we say, actually, it's factored in that we create disappointment along the way, and we try to avoid as much as possible this year. And so in marketing terms, it's a funnel, right? Thousands of people sign up, and you get as many of them to actually meet, but you lose some along the way. And also the feedback probably wasn't, as I mentioned, collected in the most structured way last year, and we're going to improve that.
Media Diversity Institute, we've been working on these issues for 20 years, and I understand exactly where you're coming from. But what I wanted to ask you, I think you touched the issue. Maybe you talked about it because I came late. I can see in the program of this particular festival, whenever there is a session when we are supposed to talk about diversity or inclusive journalism or media as bridges. A lot of freelance journalists talking about it. We've been talking with the EBU, European Broadcast Union, about some joint work, and all their members are public broadcasters, and they told us that their members are not interested anymore in doing anything related to migration. There is migration fatigue. So you are doing a great job, and be proud of it, because that's the role of public media, to reflect society. But my question is, why so many freelance journalists in this field? To who do you then sell your stories? Do any tabloids come to you? Any public media come to you to buy your services? And then for you, Sebastian, 1,200 people, 600, these are all huge numbers. Is German public broadcaster, do they come to you? Why don't they take your model and introduce it to their primetime news bulletin? Because that's the role of them, to give the voice to every bubble.
Yeah, so they're on board this year, and we're hoping that we're going to do exactly that.
Yes. It's my own motivation to do that, because I think it's very important. I studied politics, and I'm very afraid of the development in society. And the traditional forms of journalism, I've done that many years for public broadcasting in Germany, they often reduce the stories and tell conflicts. And they search for people who represent the one group and represent the other groups. And for me, it's very important to take part now in a process for a new vision. I think it's important that we look for forms, how we can make dialogues between the groups, and look with a journalism critical view that's beyond questions, but in a constructive way, and to find solutions for conflicts in society. So that's my personal opinion, and it's my own power and my own motivation to do that. And I'm looking for people who think in the same way and who like to develop it. Yes. Good. I work over 20 years for the WDR Cologne and ARD. I've made documentary films and long forms for radio and television, but I have to look who wants to buy the story. I don't know it yet. Yes, that's it.
We have time for about one more question. Anybody else? Greg, you seem to have the only hand up.
But I'll take one anyways. I'm Greg Munno with Syracuse University. Love all these projects. I'm wondering, particularly for the one-on-one conversations, if it would spoil it to do it over Skype or something like that. I asked for two reasons. One, spinning off Regina's first question, are we kind of giving up on network technologies as a way of having these types of engagement? And two, just for people who might be homebound or particularly afraid to meet someone face to face, would that create a lower barrier to participation? Thank you.
So we were thinking about this for the future. There are European elections next year, and one idea is to do something like Europe Talks, where you would get somebody from France to talk to someone from Poland, for example, and then obviously there would be an online component, so you could just exchange Skype names, for example. For now, I think the offline element is really important to us, because we feel it makes a difference when you sit in front of someone. But it's not something I would exclude totally for the future.
That was a short question, so we actually have time for one more. Go ahead.
How do you include the radical views? Because obviously these people like to hide behind the pseudonyms and the anonymity of the web. And when it comes to Europe, all these questions are now a lot of discussed within the radical circles. And I don't think that these people would come to these kind of conversations and want their name and their views publicly displayed.
So yeah, that goes back to the challenge of finding people from the entire political spectrum. Although I would also say there can be cutoff points. You know, maybe we don't need the most radical of them to be there. Like, I'd be happy. There are enough contrasting and opposing political views, like between conservatives and left-leaning people, and I think it'd be a huge step forward if they entered into a dialogue before you tackle the much bigger problem of bringing somebody back from radicalism.
Well, I think we are at time. Is that correct or no? Do we go till 4:30? I'm asking you. I'm the moderator. Let me look at the program. Oh, well, oh gosh. All right, well, kick up your feet, folks. I was wondering if the panelists had a question they'd like to ask one another. Not to put you on the spot, but. Okay, never mind. You can pick up one.
We met yesterday
for all day.
We had a long time conversation yesterday in a full-day workshop that we did for finding common ground. Is there someone else who'd like to ask our panelists a question? Okay.
Otherwise, we should just all go get a beer. I mean, just kidding. Not encouraging alcoholism.
We'll be here.
Yes, that would give time. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'm here till Sunday, so not here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then, hearing no objections, I think our panelists are willing to stay and talk individually with anybody from the audience. Please join me in thanking these projects.